four things. Assignment part 1, which is the design of the network. Part 2, which is the actual virtual machine build of the network. The practical tests, which is obviously on virtual machines in the classroom. And a theory test, which is a multiple choice questions done under supervision in the classroom. So today we're going to talk about, firstly, let's talk about the part 1. If you're not sure when things are due, look at your study schedule for term 1. That's our group, okay? Term 1, there's an external one as well, but that's obviously for the external students who are doing this over a whole semester because they're working or something like that. But you can see, guys, that the assignment 1 is actually due at the end of this week. So just bear that in mind, and don't forget, guys, I know it seems like it's piling up and already, but don't forget, for the assessment part 1, there's actually an information gathering event. That's where you're going to ask me questions about existing practices, existing network, existing procedures, how things are, to sort of understand the network that you're needing to redesign or fix up beforehand. Okay, that needs to happen before you submit the assignment, otherwise you won't get some vital bits of information such as the amount of storage they need, which is required as part of the assignment. Okay, so get that done. We're going to start assignment part 2. So if you remember, assignment part 1 is the designing a network for this this scenario we gave you, which is that Erfys Confectionary company. But obviously, regardless of whatever you design, this is, let's say, this is what you're more likely to get. This is more likely that instead of you being the designer, you're going to get a design given to you. Not necessarily the best adjusted solution, adapted solution for the thing, but it's more of a solution that we need you to do in order to prove that you can do the things that we're teaching you in class. Okay, so if we actually skip over to the diagram, this probably allows you to visualize what you're going to end up with. Okay, by the end of this particular assignment, you're going to end up with 4 servers, a workstation, and these servers, if you notice by the name, has a naming convention. A naming convention means this is the policy that our company is wanting to use. Obviously, if you're working for our company, you should abide by that naming convention. You can see it's XX, ADL, RWDC for this one, for example. What does that mean? That means that if you read on, you'll see that the XX means your initials. For me, it will be AZ. ADL represents the site, in this case Adelaide, and then the 4-letter or 5-letter next bar is the main function of the server. In this case, it's a read-write domain controller, okay? As opposed to a read-only domain controller, which we'll talk about in the for AWS. Then there's this Adelaide DHCP server, Adelaide file server, Adelaide Windows Security Update server, okay? And you can see with this Windows Security Update server, there's actually 2 lines coming off it. That means there's 2 network cards, okay? One of them is on this network, which will later tell you it's a host only, or VMnet 1. So if you've done your 4IVM, you should understand that means it's only internal to the computer you're sitting on, host only. Whereas this one is actually plugged into what's called a NAT device. So that's equivalent to our NAT network on VMware. And there's a NAT device on that VMware network that actually translates. That's what network address translation, that's what NAT is. Translates from your private network to the physical network. Okay, this is just like how your ADSL router works at home. Your ADSL router works with NAT, and it translates from your private LAN to the internet. Okay, in this case, it's translating from your private host-only network to the physical bridge network. You can see that there's going to be a domain, because obviously we're teaching you all about creating domains and users and whatnot. And the domain is going to be EC your surname. So it's not actually your surname or last name. It's whatever your last name is. My name is Zhao, so it's going to be ec_zhao.com. That's my domain. For you, it's yours. If we have a look at this first part is talking about what do we need to do, and how when we're going to do it, what order we're going to do it in. It's a bit like, if you think about it, if you're a builder, you're going to come in and build a fence for this property. You don't just go in and voila, a fence is done. you sort of have an idea of actually you're going to do the measurements, you're going to dig the fence post, you're going to install the fence. Maybe you have to do a few other tasks as well. I'm just generalizing because I don't know exactly what goes into making a fence, but you're not going to do it just voila. You suddenly got a fence. There's actually an order of doing things, just like baking a cake. You don't stick it in an oven before you actually mix the batter, right? So obviously, in a project, an IT project, you have to almost think about the tasks you need to do. Don't need to go to such great detail, but at least the major tasks, like install server, whether that the physical installation of the server on premises, whether that be the installation of the operating system. The next part might be install Active Directory, deploy Active Directory, create user accounts and stuff like that. But think of all the tasks you might have to do, okay, to get this as a complete solution afterwards. Okay, I'm not after super detailed tasks, just general big ticket item tasks. Okay, and give you estimate, like obviously, like just like if I'm building a fence or baking a cake, I know that this is going to take me roughly this amount of time. That's overall time. But what about the individual tasks? Okay, you know that I can't create user accounts before the Active Directory is created, so there's actually has to be ordered in the right order, hasn't it? I can't bake the cake without mixing the batter. But how long would it take for me to mix the batter? Not necessarily accurate time to the stopwatch or anything like that, but an estimation of time. Just like I know I'm going to take my mum to the airport on Friday, I need to estimate how long would it take for me to get to my mum's place, how long it would take from my mum's place to the airport, and will she make it there before her flight? Yep. So obviously it's a scenario based, so this is going to be in a real life situation, not on a virtual machine necessarily. Well, you know, well, it tells you what users you have right at the back. Okay, these are all the users you have to create, whether that be a real life situation or this scenario. Okay, so you have to estimate how long that will take. Okay, I'm not saying I'm going to time you and say, oh, this guy's he said 5 minutes, really took 6.5. He's wrong. No, I'm not going to do that. But basically, the idea is that you actually have a think about it, because you're going to be working on projects when you come out of get these sort of qualifications, aren't you? Okay, right from the get-go, you're not going to necessarily be doing this part of it, but you're going to be part of the implementation team who's being allocated these tasks to be done in a certain time frame. But you're just, in this case, you're having a go at doing it yourself, and it's no right or wrong answers, but obviously there's sensible ones and not so sensible ones. If you allocate yourself like 10 minutes to install Active Directory, and someone else was estimated at like 2 hours, it's not necessarily one is better than other. You got to be more, you just have to understand what does it mean if it takes that long. Service that is down. So just like you're working, you're not going to a brand new no network, no user situation, are you? You go into a situation where there's users using their computers, where there's actual people needed to do their work. There's a company who needs to still make money. So you can't just say, hey, you guys stop work for 2 weeks and I'm going to build this for you, and when you come back, it's going to be perfect. It's like, how can you work around the situation? So besides how long it will take, you need to actually specify which date and times you need access to the premises. Okay, so that way you can organize with the company that these are the times I need access. That's just like anything. Like if I'm building a fence and I need to go to your house on the 5th of September and I'll be there from 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. because that's how long it will take, then I will organize access to your site with you, wouldn't I? Same idea. And also, if it means I'm building that fence that you have to not park your car in your driveway, that's really a service downtime, isn't it? That you can't put your car there. Well, in this case, it's like if I'm actually going to might be migrating the data that you have on all your workstations to the file server, maybe it means you can't use those files while I'm doing it. So maybe that means that for that particular task, there'll be downtime to the organization. If that's the case, wouldn't it be sensible if I could organize that downtime to be at a time that's not in the middle of a business day? Probably be better. Yeah, sorry? Yeah, while they're shut. So that's why when we organize these tasks, it's bit like planning what we're going to do, when we're going to do it, and when we need access, and what is the downtime. Okay, so that's what we have to do here. And for you to basically, what you're going to do is actually create a little video, just like I'm doing now with the Skype for Business, and talk through some of these tasks where you need access and stuff like that to present to the Evan Zerfel, because obviously he has agreed that yes, this is going to be the times that you're going to be needing access, and this is the downtime. When we talk, then we talk about TCP/IP configuration. So you don't need to talk about IP addressing, as in you don't need to do subnetting like you've done in your pre-WNF. What you're given is you're given that this is the network ID. We all understand that, right? Network ID. You notice there's a YY. Basically, that's a individual number that we will give you, so that everyone in here is a little bit different. Okay. So in fact, instead of me giving it to you one at a time, we're going to just make it as your date of birth. Okay, for me it's the 17th. I was born on the 17th, so my YY will be 17. You get me, guys? So you're born on the 21st, your YY will be 21. So hopefully everyone gets a sort of unique network. Then you have the virtual machines. Okay. You can see that there's the Windows 10. So for this subject, really, we don't care if you know how to install Windows 10 or not. Well, you've done it plenty of times in other subjects. Really, it's a service. Okay, it's a service that we care about in this subject. So for the Windows 10, you can use that Windows 10 VM that we've given you for the labs, and just use in this situation. Okay, change the IP address, change the domain, whatever you have to do, get it to work. But for your servers, you have a domain controller. You can see for this domain controller, I'm going to have 2 hard drives, which is going to be configured as mirror. And to be honest, we haven't done that yet, but in the next lesson, we'll learn how to do that. For the file server, we're going to have 1 20 gig hard drive, really for the operating system. Then 4 60 gig hard drives, which will be created in a storage pool, and then creating a virtual disk with a parity layout. And you're probably going, what did he just say? I don't understand. Again, that's something we're going to be talking about in the next couple of lessons. So these are all virtual machines, aren't they? So these are not physical hardware. This is virtualized hardware. So we all know how to use VMware. For this DHCP is very simple. For this other update server, the only uniqueness is that there's 2 network cards instead of 1. And there's 2 hard drives, 1 for operating system, 1 for storing the updates. Okay. So how long did it take you to install the server when we did it in lesson 1? Hour? Yeah. Yeah, up to an hour, 20 minutes to up to an hour. If you have 5 of them, that just means 100 minutes straight away. They're the fastest, right? Yeah, that's right. I was hoping someone would say that. You'll do 1 in clone. What kind of clone? Should it be a full clone? What's a full clone, by the way? Yeah, what do you mean by clone the full? Full copy, yeah. So if it's this virtual machine is 10 gigs, how much is this? So we're another 10 gigs for another one. So you can imagine that, oh, there's 5 of them. That's going to be 50 gigs minimum, isn't it? That's a lot. So what's the other type of clone? Link clone. Okay, link clone. What's the difference between that and a full clone? Exactly right. Well said. Okay, so the original might be 10 gigs, but the new clone has nothing initially, but then expands as you make changes. Okay, so but the downside, like you were saying, is that it depends on the files here from the original. So if you mess up the original, then the clone will be dead as well. Okay, so there's a downside and positive. So what I want you guys to do is actually create what's called a golden master. Okay, if you've never heard of the term golden master, it's what VMware calls a template virtual machine. Okay, you can see that here's a whole video dedicated to creating a golden master, but let me just quickly show you. So basically with a golden master, it's like creating a template. A template, just like in a Word template, has some things pre-done for yourself, doesn't it? Okay, so if we look at this, all these servers, what's common about them? Yeah, they all have at least 120 gig hard drive, don't they? What else is common? well, you can't really put them in the same domain straight away, but that eventually will happen. But what about the virtual machines is the same? Operating system, that's a key one, okay? And also, at least one network card, and yeah, at least one network card, at least one 20 gig hard drive. So those are the things in common. So we know that if we make a template as close as possible to what we need, then there's less fiddling about or messing about or adjusting or specializing after the fact. So what we've figured out is they all got the same operating system. They've all got the same 20 gig hard drive. They all have at least one network card. So what we do is instead of creating one that's specialized like one of them, we just create a new virtual machine. We make a custom. I will install it later. It's going to be a Windows Server 2016, wherever it is. Sorry. Here it is. And we're going to call this the Golden Master. And we're going to obviously create a folder where that's going to be held. Okay, so I'll assume that you guys will understand that. In this case, I want you to all choose BIOS, not the UEFI, because if you choose that, you get some weird partitioning table afterwards. But if you choose BIOS, you'll just get the one system reserve, which is what we saw in the worksheet, okay? And the processor really doesn't matter. This is just a practice virtual machine. It's not a real life production virtual machine, so that's not important. But the amount of RAM, it's for server, 2 gigs is probably the minimum you need. But depending on your real life system, okay, I've got 5 virtual machines there. That's going to add up to be 10 gigs, isn't it? So what if I only got 8 gigs at home? Maybe that means I can't run all of them at the same time, or maybe I'll just put it as 2 gig to start off with, but then adjust those ones once I've got the operating system on, down a little bit after the fact. You get me, guys? You're sort of tweaking it according to your systems. But 2 gigs is fine. And they're all going to have at least a host-only networking, which what we'll choose. And with the hard drive, we're going to just use what's recommended, create a new virtual disk, and they're all going to be 20 gig at a minimum. And we're going to store it as a single disk file. Okay, it's if you're not told what this means in your full IBM, it basically means if you choose this option, it's going to split it every 4 gigs. Why is that? Can you remember why? Yeah, like what? File system. FAT16 definitely won't. Even FAT32 won't. Okay, so but NTFS is fine. So therefore, if you have on your portable hard drive FAT16, probably not, FAT32 or FAT, it might be just called FAT. You probably shouldn't be using that. But if you do, you don't want to change it, you need to check split. Okay. For me, I don't use that. I want to keep it as a minimal amount of files as possible. Otherwise, I get a whole bunch of files. And that's the default name. I'm going to leave it as is. Okay, and this is the end result. So this is the new virtual machine, and we all know how to install an operating system onto a virtual machine, so I'm not going to go through and do that. But basically, we worked out that the commonality between all these servers is that it's the same operating system, isn't it? All Server 2016. So we don't need to install it 5 times, like we said. We can install it once with Server 2016. And let's pretend that this is my Server 1 is that. I'm going to change it back to my server base snapshot. But after you install the operating system with a virtual machine, what should you always do? No, not necessarily that. VMware tools, very good. Okay, so if you don't know what VMware tools are, it's a set of utilities that's installed inside the virtual machine that allows us to click and be out of it really easily, allows us to copy and paste files, allow us to create shared folders, allow us to use Unity, allow us to do so many other little things that makes just life so much easier. So always, as a general practice, best practice is wherever you create a new virtual machine, install VMware tools straight away for it. Okay, so that's number 2. But with Windows, when we make a clone is a duplicate, isn't it? Duplicate. It's identical in every way. I think I've spoken about this in this class. What's the problem with that? Sorry? SID, yeah. MAC address not so much because it's a clone, it knows that, so it can change the MAC address automatically, but it doesn't change the security identifier or SID. Okay, the SID. Okay, remember we talked about the GUID and the RID, and they make it into a SID for every Active Directory object. It's like your student ID. It'd be a little bit weird if you had two students with the same student ID. It would be, what's going on? And especially with Active Directory, it's a security issue, isn't it? Okay, so therefore, when we make a clone, doesn't matter if it's a linked clone, full clone, it's gonna be the same SID. Okay, but what we can do is, if I power on this server 1, oh, the other thing I didn't say is that you see how we have all these names up here, all these names. This is what you should name your computers and also your virtual machines. That's the best practice for virtualization, is that your virtual machines and your computer name, you know, the NetBIOS name you set inside the operating system, is the same, because you don't want to have a whole bunch of virtual machines with different names to the actual computer names on the network. It gets confusing, doesn't it? So if you keep it the same, it's just a sensible practice. But if I go to my server 1, you can see I've actually, just pretend I've just installed this server. Sorry, what's my password? Password 1, I assume. Yes, it is. Let's get rid of this golden master, and let's actually pretend that this is the golden master. So if you don't name it correctly, you can just go in here and actually rename it. All right. So when you install this, you've installed it. It's actually working. This is just as if you got the the operating system just installed. I haven't allocated a static IP address or anything like that. You don't need to do that just yet. But you can see, forget about that. That's just because, but you can see if I go to control panel, add remove programs or features, that you can see I've installed VMware tools, which is where we sort of left off just then. So before we can make that golden master, we need to do this. So on every Windows system, we can actually type in Windows system, I'm losing my track of where I'm, system 32. sysprep .exe. Okay, this, if you don't know what this is a system preparation tool. It's a Windows tool specifically for in the situation where you're imaging or cloning computers. Okay, in VMware we call it cloning, but in real life, even though we might be deploying this whole classroom, we might be doing imaging. Okay, it's a fast way of doing the same thing to physical computers. So if I run that, here it is. It's a pretty simple tool. What we need to choose is enter the out-of-the-box experience, OOBE. What does that mean? That means you go through a tiny mini setup after you finish. It's just like choosing the language and stuff like that. But the key thing is this generalize. Okay, when you say generalize, that's when your SID gets stripped away and gets randomly regenerated. Okay, that's very important. That's the key step. And the other key step is instead of reboot, we wanted to tell it to shut down. Because sysprep has two parts. It does some parts and it shuts down, and when it starts up again, it finishes off the second part. It's that second part that actually generates a new SID. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to sort of catch it right in the middle, just as it's actually finished the first part, but before it does the second part. You get what I'm saying there? So once we actually catch at that part, make a snapshot, and we clone that snapshot for new virtual machines, when we create this new virtual machine, it will finish off that second part, which then gets you a new SID. You get me, guys? So if we don't catch at the right time, you'll just end up with another computer with the same SID. Even if you run through the sysprep, if you let it totally finish, it's just got a new SID. But if we clone it from that stage, it's just the same SID again on a new one, isn't it? So we need to choose shut down. That makes life easier. And if I actually show you what happens, is that it just starts the first phase, like it says, and it's going to shut down. Bear with me, as with all computing, there's plenty of waiting in IT. And it's not so good when you're actually doing a demo, of course. So hopefully you sort of catching the steps, but I do if in that video, I do say a little bit slower. But let me just write down the path. So that's C, Windows, System 32, sysprep, sysprep.exe. Okay, so you'll find that this is going to be a recurring theme that we're going to use this in a lot of Windows classes because it's a common thing. Okay, and obviously right now my computer's shut down like I intended, and at this point, what you do is you go to Snapshot Manager. You take a snapshot, and we call this golden master. Take snapshot. You can give it some notes. For example, administrator password equals password 1. For example, just some notes so that in the future you remember this kind of stuff. But if we take, so just ignore these snapshots, by the way, okay? Just look at this. So now we're ready to create our clones. So what we have to do is just select this snapshot and we click clone. And like we said, we're going to use an existing snapshot. We're going to use a link clone method. And we're going to call it, let's call it AZ ADL RWDC, like the domain controller that we talked about. And obviously I'm putting in a location where I know it's a folder, it's a folder containing the virtual machines, not just one folder for all the virtual machines. Each virtual machine has its own folder, okay? Finished and done. You can see how quickly that was done. Here's my new domain controller. At this point, from now on, after you're happy with the golden master, you do not do anything with it. You never turn it on. You never mess around with the files for the golden master because, like we said, if you mess up the golden master, all your clones will be effectively dead. Yeah. So right now, from now on, the golden master sits there just providing this base system. So once we power on this new clone, it will complete the sysprep process by stripping away the SID and generating a new one. You'll see it will go through a mini setup. That's the out-of-the-box experience. So bear with me as that happens. So obviously once you've got this golden master, you then make it specialized. So I could have, once this is finished, I'm going to turn it off and I'm going to add another hard drive and anything else that it needs. I'm going to name the computer system and its IP addressing with a specific name and a specific IP address that's given to you in the assignment. So while that's happening, we don't need to look at it, but you can see the operating system is already on there. It's going to go through that mini setup. And just to show you how can we check that the SID is different, if we go to our L drive, 5ICW, where is it? Oh, here it is. 5ICW, there's a PS Tools. Actually copy that. I might just make a new clone. So I might just do another clone just to show you. So AZ ADL FS for the file server. And we'll power that one on as well. All right, so here's the little mini setup that we're talking about. So just have to go through it. do this later. That's the license key, but it's based on that trial password, trial version. So we should have 180 days. And I've set the administrator password, and now it's a brand new system with a brand new brand new SID. Okay, so basically we've just, instead of spending the 20 minutes or hour, someone said, of installing a brand new server, I've done it within probably 10 minutes. Okay, and that's talking through it as well. And now I've done another one at the same time. I could do as many as I need. But just talking about the PS Get Sid, if I actually go back here and copy it, because I've got the VMware tools installed, I could just paste it. If I don't have that VMware tools installed, that I wouldn't be able to do that. And if I actually extract it, so extracting is basically the same as unzipping. And then from the command line, I put on the C drive, didn't I? So go to C drive, cd ps tools, ps get sid is the command, is the utility. Okay. And if I agree to using it, you can see there's my SID. Okay. If I go to the file server, which has finished the cloning as well. Oh, sorry. Accept. And if I actually log into that one as well, here, copy that again, go in here, oops, sorry, I must have, I click copy, paste, extract all, close all these things off, start a command prompt, change to the root of the C drive, because that's where I put it, change to the PS tools folder, PS get SID is the command, accept the agreement, and you can see that's my SID for this computer. It's a long SID, isn't it? But what I do is I just look at the last 3 digits, 142. We go check that one, that's 188. You can see they're clearly different. So that's how I know that SID has been changed. Okay? So that sysprep is the tool to change the SID. The PS tools, specifically the PS get SID command, will show me the SID. Okay, let me just. So PS get SID.exe, which is part of the PS tools. As a part of the set of tools, PS tools. All right, guys. So basically, in a nutshell, I've given you how to create what's called a golden master. So hopefully you understand that a golden master is a template virtual machine. And we're using it to create link clones, as many as we need, without taking too much time and making it so much easier. Okay, so with this LA domain controller now, I can actually just turn it off. And if you remember, we needed 2 hard drives. This is where we would specialize now. We would add a second hard drive, and it was 20 gigs as well, I think. So we'll make it 20 gigs, and we'll store it as a single file. It's going to be called something or other. And this is where we'll power it back on. We'll give it a specific computer name. We'll give it a specific IP address, and all that is actually specified in here. You can see there's the IP address, there's the computer name, Okay, so this is where we start. And obviously, what do I want you to do today? Before you go today, I want you to be able to get me to check that off. Check that you got the golden master. Check that you've got the different clones for the different servers. Check that they have all different SIDs. Check that they have the right name and right IP address and right virtual hardware. You get me, guys? And that's the start of your assignment part 2. And guess what? This term we're going to do a little bit differently than the past. What we're going to do is we're going to check it off as we go. Right now, based on what you've done in class, you know how to install server, you know how to install Active Directory, you know how to create users, you know how to create groups. So really, this assignment is taking what you're learning on from the worksheets and changing it a little bit to a different scenario. And hopefully you're using what you've learned and applying it in this situation, which is all about competency, isn't it? You're not going to get instructions on how to do every little thing, every little situation when you go to work. You have to take what we're learning in class and applying it into that situation. So you'll see that there's an Active Directory design where you might have to create the different organizational units for this scenario here. You will have to create a naming convention. You know how I gave you a naming convention for this organization, didn't I? But what about the user accounts? You know the one we use in class is first letter of the first name plus a surname is your username, isn't it? But that's not what everyone uses, is it? In TAFE, really, it's your student ID is your username. You might be using your email address, but it maps back to your student ID. So that's what this computer and naming convention is all about. Creating the organizational units, creating the users accounts, and each user should have a home directory. Okay, if you remember, we did that. Okay, we need to create a user template. Again, we've done that. We need to create all the groups that's required. So that's the AGDLP planning. Okay, so if you're not sure about that, because obviously I was away last week, I have another video. So here's a video for creating golden masters, but if we actually go to your session for today, which is the assignment part 2, there's the golden master video, there is the AGDLP video, which is an example of the AGDLP methodology, okay, which I'll go through a little bit more detail, which is what I was hoping to do in class last week, but I was sick. But no matter, we've got that in a video anyway. Getting back to this, we won't go too much more into this, but let's just highlight what you can do. What you can do is you can do resource sharing. Okay. So basically creating shared folders, assigning permissions. But to be honest, I would probably hold off on doing that until next class. Okay, until the next 2 lessons, because if you notice in our schedule, next lesson we're going to learn all about RAID. And guess what? That refers to storage, doesn't it? So RAID for the domain controller, mirror. And the next lesson after that, we're going to talk more about storage, and we're going to look at storage pools. And that's what you need for your file server. That's where your files are going to go. So if you create the files before you actually do the mirroring or the RAIDing or the storage pool stuff, you might have to do it again. Not to say that's a bad thing. That's sometimes a good thing where you have more practice. But just be aware that until you do this part, you might have to wait until you create the shared folders after that. Okay, but that's not necessarily say that you can't practice right now. So what do I want you to do right now? What I want you to do is work on that golden master. Okay, you can't take my servers and adapt it for your needs. What you need to do is actually build it from scratch based on your assessment of what's common between all the servers in that assignment, which we sort of spoke about anyway. Going through the golden master technique of creating a golden master, then using the link clone to create all your different servers. Get a copy of the Windows 10 to use for the client purpose of the client. Put all of that on your portable hard drive before you go. Okay, get me to look over your golden master and stuff before you go. And if you don't get it done in time today, that's something I want to look at tomorrow. Okay, finish off for homework. But that's that's a critical start to it. And this term, you'll still be asked to create documentation as part of that assignment. But what I'll be doing is I'll be marking you off on your virtual machines along the way, which means it's in your best interest to attend every class. And during those classes, when we start doing the practical, you'll have a chance of working on those assignments. And while you're working on it, once you get a section done, call me over to make sure you're right. If you're not right, you want feedback straight away, don't you? Okay, instead of you waiting 3 weeks down the track before you're getting feedback. If you're doing something right, good, keep on going. I will tell you to keep on going. But if you're doing something wrong, you want to know it's wrong, why it's wrong, and maybe I won't tell you the answer, but I'll tell you certainly why it's wrong, because after all, it's an assessment. So you have to sort of work out the answers. I might point you in the right direction, but you might have to work out some of the answers yourself. Okay? So that's what I want you guys to be working on right now, working on your Golden Master and getting those clones ready for me to check. But when I come over to check it, I want you to have that PS Get Sid command entered so that it's displayed with different SIDs. You get me, guys? All right, so get on with that.